About 5 years ago, I went through what was probably the most painful and unexpected event of my life. Just a month before my wedding, I discovered my fiancée, Karen, had been cheating on me with my older brother, Chris. To make things worse, she was pregnant, and they told me the truth only because she wanted to keep the baby. It was a complete shock and betrayal, especially since Karen and I had been together since high school, sharing a deep bond that I thought was unbreakable. Karen and I had been dating since our junior year of high school. We went through college together, and after years of being together, we got engaged. It felt like a natural progression in our relationship. We'd been through so much, and everyone around us assumed we'd eventually get married. But shortly after our engagement, Chris decided to confess his feelings to Karen. He told her he had always loved her, and with our wedding coming up, he felt he had to tell her now or never. I later learned that, after this confession, Karen began to feel something for him too. They both started acting on these feelings behind my back, which eventually grew into a full-blown affair. I only found out about all of this because they decided to come clean due to the pregnancy. One evening, Chris, Karen, and my parents sat me down. They explained that Karen was in love with Chris, that she was pregnant with his child, and that they wanted to be together. I was crushed. It felt like my whole life and all the plans I had with Karen were just ripped away. I even tried to talk to her afterward, hoping she might change her mind and come home with me. But my mother quickly stepped in and shut me down. She made it clear that nothing was going to change and that I had to accept it. To my surprise, she was entirely supportive of Karen and Chris's relationship, almost aggressively so. She even told me that if I had any issue with it, I should keep quiet because Karen was pregnant and shouldn't have any stress. My father looked ashamed and tried to comfort me, but he didn't say much in the way of support. My mother, on the other hand, was entirely focused on the fact that she was finally getting a grandchild. She didn't seem to care what I was going through. She told me that since Karen was pregnant, I should leave them alone and let them live their lives. Karen then moved in with my family, as her own parents refused to speak to her after they found out what she'd done. We had to cancel the wedding, but my parents paid all the costs, so I didn't have to handle any of that. Afterward, I felt completely isolated and betrayed by my family. I refused to speak to any of them, especially my mother, who seemed to support Karen and Chris as if nothing was wrong. For the last 5 years, we've had zero contact. I cut myself off from them completely. The only one who even tried to reach out to me was my father, but I wasn't interested in speaking with him. I wanted nothing to do with anyone who was okay with what had happened. During these years, I struggled a lot. I'd been with Karen for so long and had genuinely loved her, so moving on was a real challenge. Therapy helped me, though, and slowly, I managed to make peace with it all. I'm still not fully over it, but I'm much better now. I did occasionally hear about Chris and Karen through other family members. I learned that Karen had a son with Chris not long after they got together. They even did a paternity test just to confirm it was Chris's child, which meant they didn't need to contact me anymore. They eventually got married and, from what I heard, had been living happily. Then, about a week ago, I received an unexpected call from my mother. It was out of the blue since we hadn't spoken in 5 years. She left a message saying she needed to speak to me urgently. Out of curiosity, I called her back. She was crying and informed me that Chris had been in a severe car accident. It was a hit and run, and he was now in a coma. The doctors weren't sure if or when he would wake up, and the situation was critical. At first, I thought my mother was reaching out to ask me to visit or provide some moral support, and I was open to that, despite everything. I felt that, no matter what had happened in the past, it was a tragic situation, and I could still be there for my brother, even if we weren't close anymore. But then my mother said something I never expected. She told me she wanted me to step up and take Chris's place for Karen and their son. At first, I didn't fully understand what she meant, so I asked her to explain. She said that since Chris was in a coma and unable to be there for his family, I should step in as Karen's partner and my nephew's father figure. She didn't just mean financially, she wanted me to move in with them and take on the full role that Chris used to have. She claimed she couldn't do it herself because she was getting older and it was too much responsibility for her. I was absolutely stunned and immediately felt a wave of anger and disbelief. I couldn't believe that, after 5 years of no contact, she was asking me to do something like this. I told her there was no way I could agree to it. I could understand that Karen and her son were struggling, but I wasn't the person who should be helping them. After what they did to me, it was ridiculous to expect me to step into that role. My mother argued with me, insisting that it was the right thing to do, but I couldn't listen anymore. I was already frustrated and upset, so I hung up and blocked her number again. I couldn't help but feel some sadness about what Chris and Karen were going through, but there was no way I was going to take my brother's place like my mother wanted. Chris was still alive, and it felt entirely inappropriate. Later that day, I decided to call my father, hoping he'd be more reasonable. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, so it was awkward, but I explained the situation and shared my frustration. To my surprise, he agreed with my mother, saying that I should consider her request. Hearing that from him left me at a complete loss. I had always thought of him as the more reasonable parent, but now even he was asking me to step into my brother's role. It left me feeling deeply confused and betrayed all over again. When I asked him if he really meant what he said, he confirmed that he did. He explained that Karen and I had a history together, and that, no matter what our relationship has been like over the past 5 years, I am still part of the family. He told me that I'm blood, and if anyone should step up for the family during this difficult time, it should be me. He also added that my mother's expectations weren't unreasonable, which completely caught me off guard. Right now, I honestly don't know what to do. For the past week, I have been avoiding talking to my family, even my other relatives. I am scared that someone will bring this topic up with me, and then I will feel forced to explain my decisions. It's an incredibly awkward situation. I can't shake the feeling that I'm the bad guy here for refusing to step up when my family really needs me. I know they need help, if not financially, then at least emotionally. But I just have no clue what to do. I recognize that what my mother is asking is strange and somewhat unreasonable. Still, I feel guilty about outright rejecting her request. I haven't even visited my brother in the hospital because the entire situation feels so uncomfortable to me. I can't even speak to my friends about this because it feels too personal. They know about my family issues, especially since my wedding got called off. But this feels like a whole new level of complication. That's why I'm posting this here on Reddit. I need some objective opinions about what I should do. I feel like everyone I know will have some kind of biased opinion. I really need good advice because I think I might lose my mind if I don't find an acceptable solution soon. I honestly feel like I'm slipping back into that dark period of my life when I was constantly thinking about Karen and Chris after I found out that she had cheated on me. It was such a dark time, and I've worked hard to move past it. I don't want to go back to that place because it took a lot of effort to pull myself out of it. Update 1. Hey everyone, I have decided not to go see my family for the time being. It's really too overwhelming for me right now. I didn't even realize how much my anxiety had increased over the past week because of the pressure my parents were putting on me. However, I'm back on my anti-anxiety medication and trying to cope with everything as best as I can. Many people have reached out to me with love and support in the comments section of my original post. and even sent me personal messages to let me know that I'm not alone, which I'm extremely grateful for. Thank you so much for that. I've also talked to a couple of my close friends and confided in them about what's happening. I really don't think I can deal with all of this alone. They've told me that I can talk to them whenever I need to vent and get everything off my chest. My friends have been very supportive and told me that my decision to not go and see my family right now is the correct one. At this moment, it's the best choice I can make for myself. I have to put myself first, no matter what my family is going through. For so long, Chris and my family have always put themselves first, so I should also do the same. The truth is, I don't think I need to be there for them emotionally. They have each other, and they can get through this together. I was the one who had nobody from my immediate family to support me after my wedding was canceled, and when I found out about the cheating. My parents turned against me and picked my brother over me, even though he was the one who did something wrong. That's all behind me, and I'm trying to move on. But I know I won't be able to do that successfully if I go back to them. I've decided to block all of them again and stick to my decision of not having any contact with them for now. I feel terrible about what happened to my brother, and I truly hope he recovers soon. No matter what he has done, I can't wish anything bad on anyone. I hope everything works out for them, but I need to focus on my own mental health right now. I'm considering going back to therapy because the way my parents spoke to me has really affected me. I don't think I'm handling this situation as well as I thought I was, and those old feelings of sadness and anxiety are coming back. Update 2. I recently heard from a few relatives that my brother's condition is still critical, and he isn't showing any signs of improvement. It's been almost 2 weeks, and he's still in the hospital. I feel sorry for my family, but honestly, there's not much I can do for them right now. Everyone who knows my family has visited the hospital at least once in the past 2 weeks to see my brother and offer their condolences for the terrible accident that happened, except for me. I would have gone to visit, but I found out from my relatives that my parents have been saying bad things about me to everyone who has visited. They've been making me out to be the bad guy, telling people that they asked me to come see them and be there for the family, but I refused. They've even accused me of saying things like this is karma for what happened 5 years ago, and that my brother deserved this. Just to be clear, I never said anything like that. Some relatives contacted me to check if this was true because they couldn't believe I would say something so harsh. When I told them it wasn't true, they understood that my parents were making up lies to make me look bad. I was really disappointed that my parents would say such things about me, especially after everything else they have done to me. I feel lucky that my relatives reached out to me. If they had just believed my parents, I could have easily found myself completely isolated from my family. For the past 5 years, I haven't spoken to my parents, but my aunts, uncles, and cousins have supported me. I don't want to lose that connection. It seems like my parents can't understand that, so they are trying to ruin my relationships with other family members. I just don't understand why they hate me so much. I've never done anything to them. My brother and I were never really close, and my parents always seemed to favor him since we were kids. It just feels so unfair and unnecessary. Update 3. Hi, I posted an update a couple of days ago, and today my mother decided to reach out to me again. I had blocked them everywhere, so she had no choice but to come and see me in person to talk. I know this conversation is going to be tough, but I need to stand my ground. I'll keep you all updated on what happens. I appreciate the support you've all given me. It really helps to know that I'm not alone in this. Thank you for listening to my story. When I returned home from work that day, the weight of exhaustion settled heavily on my shoulders. I had spent the entire day navigating the demands of my jobs, and all I wanted was a moment of peace to unwind. Instead, There she was, my mother, waiting for me, her presence like an unwelcome shadow. My instinct was to retreat, to get back into my car and drive away, but her eyes locked onto me, and I felt compelled to engage. At that moment, I was resolute. I had no intention of inviting her into my home. I knew that once I did, it would become nearly impossible to usher her out. So, I opted for the front yard, thinking it might create a natural boundary. That decision quickly spiraled into chaos. What began as a seemingly innocuous conversation soon escalated into an all-out verbal confrontation, drawing the attention of our neighbors, their curious eyes peeking through the blinds. She started with small talk, the kind that felt painfully trivial against the backdrop of our fractured relationship. I responded politely, forcing myself to engage. But as the conversation unfolded, my frustrations bubbled to the surface. I couldn't hold back any longer. I needed to confront her about the lies she had been spreading, her attempts to paint me as the villain in our family saga. "Why have you been telling people fabricated stories about me?" I demanded, my voice tinged with hurt and frustration. "It's not fair. I've never wished anything bad on our family, even when they treated me poorly. I just want to move on with my life. But you all make it so difficult." I had bottled these feelings for far too long, and seeing her was the catalyst I needed to unleash my pent-up emotions. I poured out my disappointment, sharing how hard it was to see them as family when their actions spoke otherwise. My words were raw and genuine, fueled by years of neglect and heartache. At first, she listened, her demeanor calm. But as soon as I expressed my desire to end the conversation, she erupted. "I'm here to apologize for everything you've mentioned," she shouted, her anger spilling over. "Your father and I realized we haven't treated you well, but you need to understand that family should stick together during tough times." Her words felt like a slap in the face. I had expected an olive branch, not a guilt trip. "I don't want to talk to you right now," I said, my voice firm. "I just came home from work, and I'm not in the mood to argue," but she couldn't let it go. Instead of understanding my need for space, she lashed out. "You should be grateful you even have a family. After your reaction to your brother's accident, I thought about cutting you off completely." I was stunned. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to process her words. She explained that my reaction hadn't been emotional enough for her liking when I learned about my brother's accident. Apparently, I hadn't shown the proper level of grief, and that disappointed her. How could she possibly expect me to fit her narrative? I was devastated more than she could comprehend, but my pain didn't manifest in the way she deemed appropriate. I tried to articulate this, but she continued to berate me, claiming my indifference reflected how little I cared for the family. That moment was surreal. It felt like I had stepped into a bizarre parallel universe where logic had no place. My parents had lost touch with reality, projecting their frustrations onto me instead of addressing their own shortcomings. As the yelling escalated, I found myself retreating further. I simply wanted to be free from the emotional turmoil she was bringing into my life. Finally, I turned and walked into my house, locking the door behind me while she continued to shout outside. "Leave me alone," I yelled back, my heart racing with anger and sadness. When she threatened to call the police, I knew I had to stand my ground. "Do it," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos outside. That finally prompted her to leave, cursing me as she stormed away. In the weeks that followed, life felt surreal. My family was still grappling with my brother's condition, and though I tried to remain distant, I couldn't help but feel the weight of their anger bearing down on me. 26 days after the accident, I received an unexpected glimmer of hope. My brother was finally showing signs of improvement. I didn't hear the news directly from my parents. Instead, I learned from my cousins, who filled me in on the developments. The fact that my brother was out of his coma was a relief, but it also opened a floodgate of emotions I had been trying to suppress. While my parents were busy wrestling with their guilt and misplaced anger towards me, I remained detached. They continued to unleash their frustrations, especially my father, who called me one early morning, trying to catch me off guard. The timing was calculated 5 o'clock, when I was still groggy and vulnerable. As soon as I answered the call, he launched into a tirade. "You're an ungrateful child. I wish you had never been born," he screamed, his words cutting deep. I was taken aback, unable to respond immediately as he rattled off accusations about my character and choices. His frustration was palpable, fueled by his inability to process the family dynamics that had long been toxic. "You're a terrible human being for not visiting your brother in the hospital," he raged. What could I say? I was the scapegoat, the outlet for their pent-up emotions. His voice echoed in my mind long after he hung up, blocking my number as he did. In that moment, I found a strange sense of humor in the situation. Here were my parents, desperately trying to vilify me, while I had long since made peace with my decision to distance myself from their drama. It was almost comical to see how far they would go to paint me as the villain. Despite their attempts to alienate me from the family, my relatives saw the truth. They knew the backstory, and they knew I wasn't the one in the wrong. I held on to that support, knowing that at least some members of the family recognized the reality of our situation. As my brother's condition improved, I silently hoped my parents would shift their focus from their misplaced anger towards me and direct it towards healing as a family. Fast forward 3 years, and so much has changed. I now live in Germany, a country that has become my sanctuary. The past few years have offered me the chance to reinvent myself, to step away from the toxic dynamics that had once consumed my life. In this new chapter, I've found love. My girlfriend and I have been together for 8 blissful months. She embodies the warmth and understanding that I had long craved. Together, we've built a life filled with laughter, joy, and genuine connection. The best part? I have had zero contact with my family. The silence has been a balm for my soul. Instead, I've maintained relationships with the relatives who treated me kindly, those who saw me for who I truly am. Hearing that my brother is doing well is comforting, though I've moved on from the drama that once clouded our lives. After he recovered, Karen, my sister-in-law, approached me with a bouquet, trying to mend the rift that had formed. Her apology was heartfelt, but I knew deep down that none of it mattered anymore. I had forgiven them, but I didn't need closure. I had already found my peace. Now, my life in Germany is filled with promise. I cherish the freedom I've found, free from the burden of family expectations and judgments. As I reflect on this journey, I am filled with gratitude for those who showed me kindness during my struggles. The love and concern from the community surrounding me helped me navigate the darkest days, reminding me that I am not alone. Life continues to unfold in beautiful ways, and I am ready for whatever comes next. Thank you to everyone who reached out during my difficult moments. Your support meant the world to me, and I hope my story resonates with those facing similar challenges. Remember, healing takes time, but it is always possible.